Okay, guys. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brett Blease. I'm a principal technical support engineer. My main focus these days is on the infrastructure and development related issues with all Qlik products. Been working at Qlik since October 2004, and other ways to translate that are 12 years, 4 months, or 7 Qlikview major releases. So I've been around a long time, have a lot of stuff stuck in my head. Hopefully I can impart some of that to you guys today and help you in your jobs in trying to troubleshoot and figure out issues that you may be running into. With that, let me go on to today's agenda. Yep. There we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to cover are some potential roadblocks in upgrading, basically some issues that we've encountered at some other customers and partners already that I felt might be key to a lot of you or be things that you should know about just to be sure you don't do an upgrade and then realize that this issue is in play and then you have to do a rollback. So hopefully this will help some of you avoid an issue if any of these things apply to you. The next thing I'm going to cover is some best practices for rolling back. I know a number of folks get stuck when they try to do an upgrade and then realize there is an issue that really impacts them and they can't move forward on that release and they've got to go back, and a lot of times they don't have the right things available to be able to do that rollback smoothly. So we're going to talk through the main key points you need to know to be sure you're set to do a clean rollback without any problems. And then lastly, I'm going to cover the new distribution service node specific configuration. Right now it's a manual process. There's an XML file that you have to rename and then change your settings in there. R&D will be improving that feature in upcoming releases, but for right now it is a manual process. So I'm going to just walk you through that real quick on how to do that and kind of cover some of the basics and give you a little overview of how I see it impacting your environments and how it might help customers with QDS cluster setups. And with that, let's go into the roadblocks. So the first issue we have relates to the FIPS security policy. For those of you not in the U.S., this is not likely something you're going to hit. I believe, as far as I know, this is just a U.S. type thing. It has to do with the federal government security requirements. Basically, there's an issue in the QDS service only to where when you try to start the service with the FIPS policy enabled, you'll either get a 1067 error or the service will look like it started, but when you refresh things, it will actually not. Let me go ahead and show you this. So as you can see in my management console here, I've got 3 QDSs, and the one on server 2 is showing it disconnected. So if I go over to that box, what I've done is I've brought up the local security policy. This you get to via the administrative tools option. So if that's not on your start menu, just go to control panel, click on administrative tools, and then you'll see the local security policy. Just double click that. That'll bring you into this applet. And what you want to do is expand the local policies, go to the security options area, and then just scroll down to see the system cryptography, use FIPS compliant algorithms for encryption, hashing, and signing. And as you can see, I've got this enabled. And what happens on the service side is when I try and start the service, it looks like everything's going to be good. Bar progresses, and then it'll finish here in a second, and then it's going to come up and say everything looks great until I do the refresh, and then we're going to see, okay, so it says I'm running. As soon as I come up here to the toolbar and I click the refresh, yep, I'm offline. The catch on this is you're not really going to see any errors in the distribution service logs. About the only place to see something here is going to be in the I can't remember if it's the system or the application log now. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, so it's in the see, warning HTTP event. Hang on, sorry, I should have double checked this. Here we go. So this .NET runtime error is the key one in the application log. And what it'll equate to is you'll see this system security cryptography MD5 crypto service provider. And the reason for this is R&D changed how we're doing the file checks in the 12.1 track. We're now using MD5 hash instead of a time-related check on the actual files themselves. And the FIPS policy doesn't like the MD5 hash that we're using. So for right now, the only way to avoid this issue is to go back into the local policies, and just on the QDS servers is the only place it should have to be disabled. But what you want to do is go in here, double click that row, just click disabled and apply, and then close that guy, and then we can come back to our services, go back down to our queues and restart him. And this time around he should come online and stay online. Okay, so he's running, and I click refresh, and he's still up. And if I come over to here, I'm still showing one QDS down, but if I just click refresh, I'm still showing one down. We'll just give him a second to come up, but we'll check back here in a little bit and see how that's going. Let me go back to the presentation, and we'll do the next issue. And I've also referenced the bug IDs for you guys in the slides, and the associated article that we wrote on it explaining what's going on. So hopefully that'll help you guys as well. Okay, and as far as I know, there's not going to be a specific fix for this at the moment. It'll be something R&D will keep an eye on. If it becomes a larger issue for a lot of customers, then they may look at it. But right now, there's no plan to do anything other than just recommend turning off the FIPS policy. There are a couple of links in the article to some Microsoft posts regarding the FIPS policy. Microsoft actually doesn't recommend running the policy either at this point. So that's a key thing to read up on as well, especially for the partners on the call. If you've got customers that insist, be sure to use that article and those links to point them back to Microsoft's guidance on not using it as well. The only place you may run into a problem is if you got any federal or possibly state accounts that mandatorily need that on. Okay, so with that, let's go to the next issue. The on multiple events completed trigger. A partner brought this to our attention. Basically, there's been a change in the behavior from the 11 track to the 11 and 12.0 behave correctly. 12.1 is not behaving as expected. So again, I've got the bug ID and the article number for you. Let me escape out of here. Okay, we got our QDS up now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my task view. The other thing that's also a little side bonus here, the expand all is not working either. I've got to submit a defect on that just as a heads up to everybody. So you have to manually go through and expand things with your mouse here. So what I've got here is I've got a head app that's using the actual on multiple event. Let me go ahead and open this. So you can see I'm doing on successful completion of app 1, 2, and 3 is my trigger. So all three of these tasks have to complete before this combine task is supposed to run. And then let me cancel out of that. And then this next task, the control reload, is on successful completion of the combine. And then these three tasks fire on successful completion of the control reload. So the difference in the functionality is in the 11.2 and 12 tracks, these tasks are grouped, for lack of a better word. And what that means is the way the check occurs in those releases is we look at the status of all three of the apps taken together. And if all three of these have not completed within the time constraint window, which is specified up here in the multiple event trigger, there's a box there when you configure that trigger. Let me see if I can get to it here. Problem is, there we go. So if I go to triggers and I do edit, so this time constraint value is one of the keys. What should be happening is it should be doing a check amongst all three apps taken as a whole, and if all three of those complete within the same 5-minute window, that's what should trigger that task to actually run at that point. But that's not happening in the 12.1 track. It's basically somewhat ignoring things. Let me go ahead and just fire off this first task manually, and this one loops as well. Now, a lot of people that use the multi-event trigger will not run into this. This is kind of a specific use case. In this case, this one runs, you start the loop here manually by clicking this one to start, and then things just keep looping through. And that's part of the problem here. For those of you that are using it as kind of a check for back-end systems to where you've got some SQL jobs or other transactional systems that you're trying to check, and then say, okay, yep, all these tasks are done now. Now you can run this. If it's just a one-a-day type setup, you shouldn't have any problem as long as any of those tasks are not running multiple times within the window. And the other, let's see here what's going on. And another thing too, just a heads up, I talked to R&D yesterday. There is a bit of an issue with the icons, and there's a new one here just in case you hadn't noticed. This queued status is a new status for 12.1 as well. And I might not have my refresh. Okay, yep, he's on. Let's go look at the details here. History. Okay, so he's queued, but he hasn't started yet. All right, sorry about this. I'm not sure why he's not started. It could be related to the other feature we're going to talk about at the end here. So, but basically, what you're looking for as far as troubleshooting this, what you'll see is when you do show task details and go to the history, you're going to see that some of the tasks have run more times than they should have. So in my case, when you get down to 1, 2, and 3, what I did is I just used a control QQ script, and I changed the auto-generate number on these so that one was like 100,000 records, this was 1 million, and this was 10 million. So the app 3 is the one that should really be controlling things. And where he would complete twice, the rest of these would complete 6 times. So there's not a proper check going on amongst these 3 tasks and that time constraint to be sure that this task only triggers when it's actually supposed to. And you'll definitely notice it if you do have this issue, because you'll notice your tasks are running a lot more often than you expect them to. So if you do run into this, let us know. We can attach that to the case for you. The expected fix right now is going to be in service release 4 for the 12.1 track, as far as I'm aware. That's subject to change as always, but plan on that showing up in the SR4 release. I don't really know of a good workaround if you've got to do the upgrade, other than maybe having the web programmers look to see if they can somehow put together a web-based front end that'll do the checks and then fire off an EDX trigger to start that task instead. That's about the only thing I can think of that might work. Some of you other partners that do more development work may have other ideas for working around it, but that's the only way I've got to try to do it at the moment. Okay, I'm just going to let that keep running in the background while we go back to the presentation here. Okay, and the next issue, I've kind of talked about this one on some prior sessions, so it's going to be a little bit of a repeat for those of you that have been on those sessions, but for those of you that haven't, Orphan Services, what this usually equates to is a reload engine appearing in the environment when you've got a licensed publisher and you're not expecting reload engines anywhere in the environment. Again, I've got the article number. I don't have a bug on this because I did open one previously and R&D made some changes, but this is pretty much working as expected. I may bring it up with them again to see if we can potentially get them to consider changing the behavior, but right now it's working as expected. I've also given you a link to the XMLDB Viewer Power Tool, which you can download, which I'm going to use to look at the actual QVPR files. So let's go back over here. So here's what I'm talking about. You'll see this orange banner and it'll say Reload Engine on Qlikview Server 6 is down. Well, as you all know, reload engines equate to distribution services, and if I go to Server 6 and I bring up my computer management app and I go to services, go down to my Qlikview services, I've got no distribution service here. So that's why I've got the orange banner, because I don't have a distribution service on this box. But what happened, a little bit of history on how I set up the environment. So I added my first QVS setup, which is basically servers 4 and 5. I put those into a cluster. And then I added server 6 as a dev QVS instance. What happens in the management service is when you add this next resource, it doesn't take into account that you've already got a licensed publisher. So it thinks it needs to create a reload engine for its environment, and that's what causes that to get set up. There's two ways to address this issue. The easy one is in the management service exe config, which is in the C program files Qlikview management service directory. There's a setting in here called, and it's these two lines together actually. So it's a possibility to make reload engines visible under system setup distribution services. And the key is show reload engines, and this is false by default. So you have to set this to true, restart the management service, and then in the management console, what you're going to be able to see, if I come down here to distribution services, you'll see my actual publisher setup, but down here at the bottom, I've got reload engines, and you can see reload engine at Qlikview Server 6. You can simply just click the red X here to delete it, and then click apply. That should get rid of it. If it doesn't, then we have to go to the second option, which is to basically take care of it via the XML DB viewer and edit the QVPR directory directly. So let me bring up computer management. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the management service just so things go smoothly. Okay, and then we'll go back to here. So this is the DB viewer. It's basically just a way to load the XML files in the QVPR folder, which is located by default in C program data, QlikTech, management service, QVPR. And then there's a backups folder in there as well. And I recommend if you try this yourself, just make sure in the management console you go to the management service and then the repository tab there and click the backup now button. That'll create a new zip file for you immediately, and that way it gives you back way to roll back in case anything gets screwed up and stops working. So what we're looking to clean up, oops, wrong file, is the distribution service file. So here's my publisher record, and I know that because I've got is publisher checked. So this is my problem record. As we know, Qlikview Server 6 is the one I don't want. So I'm going to scroll over to the right to the ID column. I'm going to click on this GUID, and I'm going to click search and find out all the locations of that GUID, because what I want to do is either get rid of these records or change the GUID to the correct publisher ID. So what we're going to do here is basically start with this table, and I'm going to right-click in this first column is the key here. Otherwise, you won't get this pop-up. So right-click in this first column, and then you can just do a delete on that row, and then the save table becomes live. Just click that and say yes to the reload, and then record's gone. And then I just leave the advanced search open and just do a find, and that confirms that that record's now clean. And then you can simply click on the next table to get that. As you can see, this is the email template files. I've already got templates for my publisher. So again, I'm just going to highlight, left-click, drag to highlight all 6 of these rows. Left-click or right-click, delete, save table. Yep. And then that's clean. I do a find. Those are gone. Message queue. This table, as I've said in previous presentations, this is kind of the equivalent of a rollback table in a database environment. So these records can normally be deleted. The reason they occur could be because you shut down the management service while an administrator had tried to commit a change. That's going to probably make these get stuck in here as well. So if you see things in here, if they're, especially if the modified times are old, it's definitely okay to just highlight them, right-click, delete, save, yes, and go ahead and get rid of them. And then do a find. Okay. QDS cluster is the last place where we need to do a deletion. As you can see, this record sticks out because we've got no work order or current config ID either. So that's the other thing that kind of tells you that this is a bad resource. These other 3 records equate to my publisher instances. So what I'm going to do is just right-click this guy, delete him, save that, confirm, and find. So we've got all the deletions done now. These last 2 tables are where we have to actually fix things because what I've got here is I've got my production cluster, I've got my development cluster. I don't want to delete dev because that's going to get rid of the resource. So what I need to do here instead is come over to the QDS ID column, and I want to copy the actual correct publisher GUID and overwrite the bad one with that record. And then sometimes you have to click out of the column to get the save table to come up. So if this stays grayed out, just click into a different column and then the save should go live. So I'm going to save that, say yep. And let's just scroll back over, make sure it took. Okay, we're good there. And I do the find again, and now we're down to the source document folder resource. And again, you can see this is my cluster QVS root folder, and he's connected to the correct publisher. And you can see I've got a folder mount under that one as well. And this is my dev server root folder, and you can see I've got the wrong GUID here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I've still got it in the memory, so I'm just going to paste here instead of do a copy paste again. And I just change that value, click save again, say yes, do a find, that's gone, so now I can close this, and we're all cleaned up here. It is possible that you may have some other records, so if by chance somebody did something else, there could be some other things that show up in our tables. If that's the case, please open a support case with us and let the techs know you need some help trying to get the QVPR cleaned up. And either myself or one of the other techs that's familiar with this will help you get it straightened out to where you're nice and clean. Okay, so with that, let's go back and restart the service and then come back to the management console. Okay, network error, and let me just do a refresh. And the banner's gone. So that's taking care of the problem there. It doesn't show up in services, and it doesn't show up in services either. That's the thing that confuses customers in 12.1 is they're like, hey, I've got this orange banner saying this service is running, but it doesn't show up in my list of services. So that's the other thing that tells you that it's basically an orphaned entry in the QVPR. And then also now if we go back to system and distribution services, there are no reload engines listed here. So that's the other way you can tell that you've actually got it cleaned up. And that's all there is to that. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, and that takes us into the upgrade best practices. So the first key thing here, as I said previously, is to back up the QVPR folder. And since I didn't show you that, let me escape out of here. So where that's at is in System Setup, Management Service, Repository. And if I scroll down here, you'll see this Backup Now button. Now this is only going to be for the XML-based repository. If you're using a SQL instance, you'll have to do a SQL, tell SQL to take the backup for you at that point. But if you're in XML, just click this Backup Now button. And what that'll do, it actually creates, let me see, let me go up one level here. QVPR, it creates the backup in here. And you can see I've got a few of these. So it'll be the one that's not, normally it runs at midnight, so that's why it's always the zeros and then a single digit on the end. But these other ones tell you, like 1921 is when I did that one, 1935. So you'll see it in there. And that's your snapshot. So if you need to do a rollback, especially if you're upgrading from 11.2 to 12.1, there are schema changes in the files. So you cannot take a 12.1 QVPR and try and run it in an 11.2 environment. It's going to result in stability problems if it runs at all. So you want to make sure you've got a clean backup prior to the upgrade. So if you need to roll back, you can restore the QVPR to the 11.2 schema. Otherwise, you're likely going to have problems. Okay, so let me minimize that. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. And I apologize. Okay. So hopefully that covers that one. Then the next thing is the Qlikview server settings ini file. So the server settings ini contains your the piece that the QVPR doesn't know about are the physical paths to the QVW files in the environment. So we need the settings ini to be able to figure out where the actual folder mounts are located, because the QVPR only has the mount name. So the QMS service has to ask the Qlikview server service where that mount actually resides if it needs to get a lookup of something. So the server has to handle that. So it's a good idea to back up your settings ini file as well so that you've got the 11.2 version, because it could be that the new release adds a new setting to the default settings as well that may not exist in 11.2. So if you roll back, try and use that settings INI, you may have a problem with the QVS service starting because of that new setting being added. So it's a good idea to make sure you back up the settings INI as well. The next one, again, kind of related to the Qlikview server. The web server is similar. It stores all of its settings in the config.xml file, and that's in Program Data Qliktech web server. The Qlikview server settings, if any, is in Program Data Qliktech Qlikview server is where that goes. And if you have a cluster, you need to be sure, well, if you get one settings INI, you're good. Just be sure when you do the restore, you restore it on every node in the cluster. Don't forget to do it on all the nodes, because if you do it on just one, if you start one of the other nodes first and start the node you changed it on later, it's going to get overwritten by the one that's already up in the root folder path. So the way that kind of works is when you start the services, the first one up checks the root folder. If any data file exists, it'll just read that and check it against its local settings ini. If there's any deltas, it'll download the changes and update its file. If the ini data file is not there, it'll push its local settings INI up to that ini data PGO file. So that's kind of how that works. And then the web server config, so the config XML has the web server settings. And again, the reason for backing this up is just in case there are any changes to that file structure in that XML in the new release. You want that old version so you don't have to worry about any compatibility problems there. And then lastly, this one's probably somewhat optional, but I'd say it's best practice to go ahead and back up your KVWs, your PGOs, your shared files, and your meta files from the prior installation. That way you can have a pristine rollback if you've got to do it. Everything will be as it was in 11.2 before you did the upgrade. So that's the safe bet in this case. All right, so let's move on to the QDS multi-node group setup. This is a new feature I mentioned. So basically, you want to ensure that you've got your environment all set up and configured before you try to make this go live. Otherwise, you may have to manually do some things or redo the template copy, which we're going to cover here in a second. And I'm going to demo this. I'm just going to go through the bullet points first, and then we'll go look at the steps to do it. And then basically, you want to check the group template in the QMS app data folder. So for the management service, so Program Data Qliktech Management Service, there's a new folder in there called distribution something. We'll check that when we go over. But that's where this template gets written. And as you bring the services online, that template file gets updated. So when you open it to look at it, it should have all the information in there and ready to go. And then we've got to basically just copy that template file, paste it, and then rename it by taking out the dot template and usually appends a underscore copy to the file name. So you just remove that, so it just becomes the .xml file. And I provided the help link directly to this section, so it can be a little tricky to find. So it'll be here in the PowerPoints in case you have trouble finding it. And the help section is really good on explaining this, but I wanted to walk through it just because it's a little confusing initially, but once you see it, it should make sense. And then lastly, you need to edit that XML file directly to set up your groups that you want the QDS is attached to and the other settings that are available to be changed there as well. So with that, let me exit out and let me show you where things show up. So in the status view under tasks, you can see I've got this distribution group column now. And if I expand my tasks out, you can see, and that guy never did run. So you can see I've got groups attached here. So what I'm doing, let me show you the template first. So here's my distribution group definition template. Let me just show you where that is. So if I go back up to the management service, in the distribution groups folder is where this is. So this is the template, and this is my renamed file, both of which I've got open here. So let me just minimize that. So this is the template. As you can see, with having that reload engine in here, I've got that reload engine appears in this file as well. So that's why I'm saying you want to make sure your environment's clean and ready to go before you copy and paste this and actually make it go live, because otherwise you're going to have some errors appearing and things. So how my file actually looks, this is the one I'm running with. And the key thing is don't uncomment any of this stuff up top. Just a heads up, anything that does have comments on it, leave that commented. If you uncomment that, that'll cause a problem as well. The errors are pretty clear regarding that. You'll see in the QDS area, which I'll show you in a second, there'll be an error message there telling you that there's a problem with the XML file. The thing you do need to uncomment are the groups, and you can add, I believe you can add more groups. I haven't tried that yet, but I'm pretty sure you can add more if you need to. They just give you A, B, and C by default. And then some of these other settings you can change. So if you've got an unbalanced QDS cluster to where you say you've got one server with 6 cores, one with 12, and one with 24, you can tweak the number of engines for distributions and administration on each node at that point, depending on how you're going to group them. Now, if you do that, you'll probably want to put each of those boxes in its own group rather than trying to actually make them the same group. Otherwise, you may have an issue if you have too many engines and not enough CPU cores. But if you've got like boxes, those could definitely go into the same group. And then you've got the concept of dedicated QVBs. So this is the base setting, but then you can dedicate a portion of these or all of them to get the dedicated tasks. And what the dedicated task points to is when you actually set a task to run on a specific group. That's what that dedicated means there. So let's go back. And then we've got, there's a graceful time minutes setting. That's a new feature as well. So what you'll notice if I go to services here and I click on my QDS cluster, I've got these little stop icons. So what this does is if you change this timeout to say like 30 minutes or whatever, when you click that stop button in the management console, it'll do a graceful shutdown of that QDS instance. So what it'll do is it'll issue the stop, but first it'll check to see if there's QVB processes running attached to that node. If there are, it'll allow those QVBs to finish as long as they finish within that grace time. Once that grace time hits, it's going to shut down regardless of whether the QVB is still running. So if you know approximately how long your task may be running, you can change that grace time out so that when the admins click that, it'll shut things down cleanly for you instead of killing things that you wanted to complete before you had to do maintenance or whatever on that node. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to do. Let me just show you where else this shows up. So over in the distribution service, we click on the QDS and the advanced tab. So you're going to see this new section, cluster node settings, and that's where you'll see the actual contents of that file. And then you'll see your distribution groups down here, and that'll tell you which nodes belong to which group as well. What the enhancements that should be coming is that at some point you should be able to make changes to things directly in the management console. But for right now, you have to do it in the XML file, restart the management service for it to get picked up. And if there is something wrong with the XML file edits that you make, what you'll see under here is you will see this section, but there'll be a red error message, and that error message would tell you usually that there's something wrong with the syntax in the XML file. And if you can't figure it out, again, just open a support case with us. We'll help you take a look at it. Hopefully we can get you up and running. Okay, let's go back to PowerPoint. And sorry, I got to go back through these again. But again, for the help, I provide the link there so you can see the details on that if you want. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and let's go see.
Yeah, so everyone, we have a little bit of time left over for some Q&A, so if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx. Are you able to find it, Brett?
Yep, I opened up chat first, but
yeah.
Okay. Okay, we got a few here. Let's see. Some of them were about numbers, audio, no sound. Okay. Yeah. So one question was regarding the FIPS issue, I believe, and yeah, that should only impact U.S.-based servers and or US-based operating systems. So when you're installing and you say you belong to the United States, I'm pretty sure that's the only place FIPS is going to show up, because like I said, it's a federal government related policy here in the States. So I don't think you should see that policy in other countries. I could be wrong on that, so take it with a grain of salt. But you can just check the policy. If you don't see it on your servers and they're running in, say, the UK, then that'll confirm that it is US-based servers only that you're going to run into that. Someone else asked if expand all was working in 12.0. There was a defect in the 12.0 track as well, but I think it was either the initial release or service release 1, and the fix was either in SR1 or SR2. So it should be working if you're on one of the later SRs. If it's not, please do a support case and let us know so we can check that. But I did run across a bug on that when I was looking for it in the 12.1 track the other day. Let's see, got another question from somebody. They upgraded 12.1 a month ago. Everything worked fine for a while. Last week, not able to open QVWs created on desktop on the server under my username. The only thing I can think of on that one is check your desktop client, make sure it's not showing as running as personal edition. If it is, that could be a problem because it's going to save the apps as a personal edition app. And I can't remember if when you try and run those via server, if that'll cause a problem or not. So that's the first thing I check. If that's not it, definitely get a case opened up with us so we can do a WebEx with you and take a look at that issue directly and see if we can help you sort out what may have happened. Okay, and then somebody noted my reload engine was down, but that was on purpose so I could show you guys that issue. So appreciate the paying close attention to things. Okay, 12.1 SR5. Right now we're on 12.1 SR2 is the current release. SR3 will be the next one, but I have not seen the release of that. SR2 was just 2 weeks ago, I think. It was right around the end of January. So I would say SR3 should be sometime probably the end of February, first part of March, which would then make SR4 likely around end of April, first part of May if we stay on track with those. So just to answer your question, SR5 in theory would be probably end of May, first part of June. But again, the current release is SR2 on the 12.1 track. Got another issue from someone after upgrade from 11 SR5 to 12 SR5. Image mini chart not showing. Yeah, on the mini chart one, that one does ring a bell. That's likely potentially known issue. So just go ahead and open a case on that or look in the articles. Usually, if we do find a bug and we think a lot of folks are going to hit it, we will write an article on it. So be sure and check the articles in the customer portal or partner portal as well, and just search on mini chart or any other tags you think we may have tagged on it. And if you don't find it, then go ahead and open a case and we can try and confirm it for you.
All right, Brett, we have time for one more question.
One more. Let me see if I can find one related to, let's see, multiple owners. Okay, I've got one. If you have multiple owners of the apps in Publisher and the app fails, can we generate an email to that owner without send to all people in the group? I'm not exactly sure how you're configured there, but you've got two different options with Publisher. The alert email dialog in the management console for the QDSs, that's for the overall admins. So the admins that have access to everything, they'll get all failures. If you've got document administrators that you want to just tie down to their applications, the right thing to do is configure them as a doc admin on that specific folder. And that's the catch is you need to configure the QDS source docs a little differently you want to basically have a separate folder for each developer or each developer group, such that you can then set the email notifications for that group. So those guys will just get the failure notices for the apps in their folder. They won't get the other ones from the others. Just beware, there's a caveat with that. If you go to change things, if you've got things currently configured under like a single source doc folder and you want to do the doc admin approach, when you go to do that, it's going to break your tasks because they're all associated with the root folder right now. So when you go to add those new folders, it's going to mess you up on the tasks. There is a means to use the XML DB viewer to realign the GUIDs. It can be a little tricky. It just depends on how many tasks you've got. If there's not a lot, it's probably easier to just go ahead and make the change to the folder structure and then have the developers go ahead and recreate the tasks. And what you could do is keep a copy of that old XML or the QVPR files, load those up into a Qlikview app, and make sure the linkages get together correctly. And then that way the developers can look at the task info in the application and see how everything was configured and just recreate it that way once you get things redone. That would be how I'd approach that.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this session. We hope you enjoyed it.